have to. Good evening to all of you. Welcome to this live session for the course on effective engineering teaching in practice. We, as was mentioned earlier, we decided to do another live session. This is Professor Karmalkar here. This is both of. I think you know all by now, but anyway, and Steffi. And Steffi. Yeah, I went off to on the film side, I guess. Yes. We are. Let me just tell you the major topics that we covered, just as a part of introduction to set the ball rolling, and then you can ask us questions. When we have time, we'll take up some of the questions that were already put up on the portal. We started out the course with an inexperienced engineering teacher's view of teaching. We thought that would be a good place to start. And then we went on from traditional lecturing to helping students learn. There's a huge difference between the two, and we saw what the difference was and how to bridge that gap. And then we saw what actually better learning is in the form of Bloom's taxonomy, one of the ways of understanding learning. And then we looked at problem-based learning and problem solving. We decided to take them together. And then Dr. Prasad looked at learning outcomes. Then we went back to active learning, cooperative group learning, flipped classroom, and lab courses. And then Dr. Javarma looked at evaluations, assessments. Then we looked at how to use research in education, the class composition, psychological type and learning, models of cognitive development, as well as learning theories, just as a starting point of the vast amount of knowledge that's available in literature in a codified form, and how we could use them to improve our teaching or the learning by students especially. And then Professor Karmalkar came and took a session on feedback and reflection, and that was what the course was about. If you have any questions, we'd like to start answering them, and we can start something with, we can start with some of the questions there. In the first one is by Paresh Moda, how to encourage students for the flipped classroom type initiative. I think I did the flipped classroom try. Take this up. That is indeed a very big challenge, how to encourage students to participate in the flipped classroom, how to ensure that they come prepared, how to ensure that they've done the reading that was assigned to them is a big challenge. And one of the most effective ways to address that challenge is to give a quiz, is to assign some marks for that quiz in the beginning of the class before you get into the flipped classroom mode. Somehow that works, not somehow, we all know how why it works very well. It works very well, and for that reason, it is considered a part of the technique itself. If you look at how we covered the flipped classroom technique in this particular course, that was one of the important components of the flipped classroom technique. Giving them an initiative, it is called. It is an initiative, and that is the only way we can ensure a large extent of participation. Otherwise, it is as low as even 30-40%. You have had an experience in your university that it is about 40%. Right? I remember our discussions in TLC. So, yeah, you want to add something?
No, absolutely. Students do care about the marks and assessment. So adding a little bit of quiz and 2% or whatever little marks you can add, that gives them a good initiative to come prepared. And once they start observing that how much they are learning in that flipped classroom model, and they have opportunity to discuss with their lecturer face to face all their doubts, that sort of works. And
Definitely. I think we'll go quickly. These are the only questions now. Are there other questions that?
I think we'll have to.
Yeah, that's right. We'll come back to this. Oh, there are already questions. Hello, Akshay. This is. Can we increase the size some more? Plus. So, Sivam, good evening. And is the stream started? Yes. No. Good evening to all. I extend my heartfelt thanks. You're very welcome. Good morning to all. I get these from a different area. Yeah. I think we'll go back to the questions and then come back to. I think we now keep switching. Who would like to take? Karmalkar, would you like to choose any question that you want to answer?
Let me see the questions.
I can scroll through.
Yeah, I'm able to see.
No, the scrolling. It's already quite large. Yeah. There was one thing on electrical engineering. There's a delay.
Yeah, it is this space.
Are you able to read that?
The doubt is not related to mentioned subject, but I request you to please answer it. Sir, I am confused. What should I do during my 4 years of Btech in electrical engineering?
You can spend an hour on this maybe.
Well, okay. Let me put it like this. Can we turn this thing off, this echo?
I think the echo is coming from some other speakers. They're not. Because of the delay, it is coming through the speaker of one of those.
Okay, maybe I should ignore that and just go on.
Please continue.
Okay.
Sherry, if you can ask them to reduce the volume on the TV, maybe it's coming from there.
Okay, so let me take your question.
Which speaker is on? Okay.
Let me reframe your question a little bit. Let's assume that you want to know about what is involved in doing a Btech in any discipline and what is involved in doing electrical engineering. Let's split this into two parts. Now, you know, the goal of Btech program in any discipline is to gain a general overview of that area. For example, as compared to Btech, in Mtech, you gain advanced knowledge in a specific field, right? So for example, if you're doing Btech in electrical engineering, you basically get an idea, an overview of the various areas of electrical engineering. That should be your goal. You should not try to specialize at the Btech level. On the other hand, at the master's level, you specialize in a specific part of electrical engineering. For instance, you may choose to specialize in instrumentation. You may choose to specialize in microelectronics, or you may choose to specialize in communications. You may choose to specialize in power and high voltage. So these are different areas of electrical engineering. So now in electrical engineering, what do you really learn? So you are learning how to manage, communicate, and store energy or power. Now, so you have those systems which can be called as power or energy systems, in which you are learning how to manage and handle, distribute, generate, and process large amounts of energy or power. And on the other hand, in communication systems, you are learning how you can process, store, or communicate information with as minimum energy as possible. So your goal in Btech in electrical engineering should be to get a good overview of these two broad aspects of electrical engineering, namely power or energy systems, and communication or information systems, right? So that is what I would say. If you have further doubts on this, you can frame your question, and then we'll look at it.
We switch and then get back. Good morning. We are still in good morning. We can. This is pro inside. Oh, yeah. I have 5 questions. Number 1, if I want to prepare for PhD research in this field, what other subject or topics do I need to learn apart from this course and apart from reference book, Wankat or Uriowicz? That's a very wide kind of a question. For some specific things that you may have in mind, would you like to give him some insight? I think he was looking at doing a PhD in teaching and learning, and he was talking to Karmarkar also. I mean, he had sent a question on the forum, which I think Karmarkar also answered. He wants to know which subjects do you want to. Let me scroll it a little up. This is. Okay, I cannot.
Difficult to just locate that.
Yeah. This thing. We cannot link that. Okay. Which subjects or topics do I need to learn apart from this course? He's interested in research and he wants to know which subjects or topics do I need to learn apart from this course and apart from the reference book. Reference book is only one. There's so many books on teaching, learning, teaching engineering, maybe not so many, but teaching engineering, this is a nice book, which nice starting point. This Wankat and Uriowicz, the 2nd edition now. It all depends on the area that you would like to focus, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. In fact, as you have rightly said, if you want to do research, in fact, more than doing coursework, you have to spend your time learning the art of research. So there are a few points on which the research education differs from a course-based education. So in research education, you are supposed to develop skills such as asking good questions, then how to read a lot. Okay, so reading skill. Similarly, how to communicate your ideas in your own words, both orally as well as in writing, and so on. So much of this is learned by actually getting into the research program, and then it is something like jumping into water for learning swimming. So first you need to jump into water. So I agree with GK that you just need to get initiated, and this course should be a good starting point for you. And after that, you join a research program, and then you can choose your courses in the particular place where you have joined for the research program. You can look around what kind of courses are available, and with the help of your guide, you can choose courses. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and also the particular thing that you want to work on would be very narrow. I hope you realize that research is all about better understanding of one thing in better understanding it in depth and great detail, and therefore that one thing is something that you need to choose very carefully, and that will happen only after you've had a chance to look at what is available and then talk to your guide and see what are potential topics. Maybe some of the topics have been researched upon significantly, and probably it will be only adding very little to what is already known in great detail. There are some areas would be just starting points, and depending on your interest, you could choose one such area. I think we'll move forward.
Just a small thing maybe I can add. During research, you can even take courses after you have chosen your area of research and defined a problem. So it is not as though your research has to start only after you have done courses. Even as you go along, you realize that, maybe because of the kind of problem you have chosen, you need to learn more in a particular area and a course is being offered, you can always take a course.
And I'm not very sure of the setups across the country, but in IITs, you could take courses anytime during your PhD. There is a certain requirement, yes, about 5 courses, depending on your previous degree, the 5 or 8 courses. And after that, you're free to choose whenever you want, right? Right till graduation, you can choose course. I think we move forward. There are quite a few questions. This question will take up when Prasad comes, how to frame program outcome for civil engineering. Suresh. So that's,
Likely you might be
stuck in another meeting. He's the head of Teaching Learning Center and he has a lot of other commitments. He was going to come here, but I think he's stuck somewhere. Still alive. Okay, fine. He should be here sometime. The next question is, that is moving by itself. Is good. How can we motivate students to give honest feedback to teachers, mentors? How can we ensure that we are giving the right feedback to students? You have some experience, isn't it?
Which one is this? How can we motivate students to give honest feedback to teachers or mentors? How can we ensure that we are giving the right feedback to students? Okay, that's a good question. Now, let's think. Let's for a moment, wear the hat of a student and see when would I like to give a feedback. So I would like to give a feedback if I feel that my feedback will be taken seriously and some change will happen based on my feedback. So this is one thing the teacher has to convince the students by his attitude or her attitude that he or she is sincerely interested in the feedback. Now, this is something that you communicate through your body language, how you speak, how you handle the course, and so on. And then one more condition we need to maintain, and that is we should collect feedback anonymously, right? We should not expect that the student who wants to give feedback should identify himself or herself. So many times people, when they want to give you feedback which requires improvement in you in some regard, no, they may not like to identify themselves because they may fear that if the negative feedback that they're giving, if somebody comes to know, the teacher comes to know who it is, and then the teacher may have something against him or her. So this is another thing. So we should always seek feedback. The conditioning should be such that the students get to give feedback in an anonymous manner. So I would feel that these two conditions should be satisfied. Now, maybe just one more thing that comes to my mind, and that is what can be a good format, to seek feedback. It's a very simple format is circulating a slip. I have mentioned it in my lecture on feedback and reflection. Circulating a small slip in which on the one side, the student writes what he or she has liked about your teaching and your course. And on the other side, the student writes what is the scope for improvement. So you must allow the students to describe their feedback rather than simply tick or rate. You can also use that kind of format where you frame a few questions and ask the students to give the feedback to the specific question. But we must also provide an open, a scope for open feedback so that they, they can say whatever they feel like.
Let me just respond to go back and forth. Moves the whole thing. Good. Suresh Sadasivam, if Dr. Redamana Prasad comes at the right time, we'll ask him to respond to this. Otherwise, I'll ask him to respond to you on the forum, definitely. Okay, yeah, this is a better way of doing it. Then Akshay Saxena, question number 2, is marks the only criterion to measure effectiveness of our research in this field? That's a very philosophical question. marks are the...
I would say actually marks is not the criteria to look into research. PhDs don't give you marks as per so it's about the quality of research and how innovative you have been and how systematic you have been to justify or null your hypothesis. More about research is about that rather than marks.
It's about the quality. It's always difficult to measure quality. We did speak a lot about it in the previous live session. However, administrators would like to have numbers associated with it, and marks are numbers that go along with it. And a lot of decisions get made because of so-called numbers or marks associated with it. That's reality. However, we, enlightened people in the field will know that that's a reflection of only one aspect of whatever the person is trying to do, whether you're trying to give the person an award or whether you are, all kinds of things. It's only one part, and that's one of the reasons I personally don't really like using a quantified thing. I mean, I agree with the saying that what can be counted does not really count, and what counts cannot really be counted. And that, I think, says whatever I believe in. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's a, as we move into research, we see more and more that things are not so objective. So if you want to, for instance, judge the quality of research, it is basically a subjective opinion of 2 or 3 experts. When you get your research publication through in a journal, how does it happen? So you send your paper and it is reviewed by 3 experts, and it is a subjective opinion about the paper that matters. And many times we have seen that the 3 experts may have different views about the same work. So this is the nature of any creative activity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so that's a part of life. And some people have tried to convert that into numbers and then write about them and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's what we live with. Next question is self. I mean, gathering improvement in marks among students through our research. No, not at all. Certainly not. I have very low opinion of toppers who are merely toppers by manipulation. I'm very blunt about it.
Let me just gather what is I mean gathering improvement in marks among students through our research.
So in other words, we through the research information that's available or the research that you do, you pick up skills of improving your teaching, and should that go only towards improvement of marks? Is the way I understand.
I mean, so you mean what he implies is that if the teaching is improved, will students get more marks? Is that what is the thing? Or unless the student gets more marks, can we really say that our teaching has improved? Is that what he?
That's another way.
What I'm saying is that's not true, though.
That's not true. That's certainly not true. That's not true. But the world will assess you that way. Be prepared for it. Yeah. We live in a non-ideal world. I mean, we don't agree with it, and any person who has enough knowledge will not agree with it. Yes. But yes, yeah, that's what he. But that's reality. That's we live in a non-ideal world. Okay, let's go to Pranesh Chinnaswamy's question. In self-financing engineering institution, lower level students are entering how to make interest in engineering subjects for such students. I believe wherever we are, whichever system we take, there will be some students who are good, some students who are in the middle, a large number of students who are in the middle, and some students who are not so good. That's reality in any different situation. The average level, of course, could be different between institutions. And it might be good to focus on that distribution wherever you are, whichever system that you deal with, and figure out means of improving the students who initially lack interest. I mean, generating interest in students who hate a subject or who lack an interest in the subject is not trivial. In fact, it's one of the biggest challenges that faces a teacher. But we have discussed some things when we talked about the biology course. If I talk about that in this course, I'm not very sure. But to very briefly mention, I'm coordinating a course for our undergraduate students. There are about 800 plus students who take that course. It is a basic course in life sciences because it is believed, I very strongly believe that whatever engineering the person pursues, at some point in time in the very near future, the person will interface with the biological system. And when a person is interfacing with that, the person must be able to at least get into it without fear. And that is the whole. So that to enable that, we thought we'll expose the student to some basal biology. That's the whole idea of that course. And I've done these statistics. I've asked students to put up their hands at the beginning of the course. 99+% hate biology when they start that course. And these are engineering students who very happily left biology to come to engineering. And here we are trying to teach them. I felt that was one of the most, I still feel that's the most challenging course that I've taught so far. Therefore, we had to figure out ways and means to start at the place where these engineering students are and then show them the relevance of biology to them. If you know biology, you can do this a lot better, that kind of a thing. If you know biology, you can solve such interesting problems. At least you can look at solving such interesting problems. This is one of the ways by which we went into that. There's an entire course on biology for engineers and other non-biologists that I offer with Dr. Madhika Dikshit, my colleague. It is also a NPTEL online certification course. Take a look at that course. That will give you some examples as to how we could handle it. The average level, of course, could be different. You might have to tune your average to your own population. But I refuse to believe that students are all bad. There will certainly be a distribution of students that I very strongly believe. If you want to add something.
I just wanted to add that when we design a course or a curriculum, you have to put in context, where are your students coming from? And if specifically you're asking that your private institutes are getting lower level students, I am assuming you're talking about students coming with low grade marks in grade 12. Now you need to put in context and see what are the extra support or resources they require to come up at that level, because at the end of the day, the final outcome is same for an engineer, be it any field. So that's what I think Professor GK was also saying.
Yes.
You need that extra mechanisms to get them at that level so that they can have the interest and you can cater that to that particular. So you need to put that in your context. Where are your students coming from and what type of support system they would require?
Any other addition? Let's move forward. Yeah. Yep. Blue arrow helps. Okay. GK sir is right. Thank you. Question number 3 related to NPTEL exam. Why MBTI is useful? How do we need it? This was covered in the course. If you can take a look at it and then ask me questions as to something more. The basal aspect was covered in the course. I'll take up this question a little later if you have something more specific. And then V.S. Muralidhar Palanki, good evening to you. Thanks for providing the course and thanks to TLC IIT Madras. You're very welcome. Sir, how practically we can execute the aspects learned from this course in private engineering commercial colleges? I think we briefly talked about one aspect. The techniques that were discussed in this course are not dependent on the type of audience that you have. This has been tested on different types of audiences across the world, not just India, across the world, or not just the US, across the world. And therefore, you can very confidently apply any technique that you feel is appropriate to your setting. In the sense, you can choose any technique, which comes easily to you and so on and so forth. That's what I mean, not the student composition. And then apply it. I'm sure you'll see an improvement. And those were the only techniques that were chosen. There are so many techniques that people talk about, and unless they have been time tested and shown to be valid for large sets of populations, we didn't choose them for this particular course. It's a very basal course. Would you like to add something?
Yeah. So one thing I would like to add is sometimes people have this doubt that the college administration has their own ways of collecting feedback and so on, which is at variance with what might have been talked about in this course. So the one important thing you should know is that whatever we have talked about doesn't necessarily depend on the administration policy. Okay, so for instance, if you have to take feedback, you can always take feedback for improving your course.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter whether the administration has that particular scheme in your place or not. And then you can convince your administration for having a feedback session and things like that. So whatever we have talked about can be implemented independent of whether the administration has a policy towards it. Okay, so this is something you can implement yourself for your improvement. That's the point.
Then once you have gathered enough data that I've been teaching this course in this particular way, for example, if I've been running a particular topic in a flipped classroom model and the student feedback for the last 10 session has been that they've enjoyed this more than the typical didactic lecture, you have something to show it to your policy makers, administration, that this is the data, what looks like, how can we implement it and make it in a more structured way.
I have no experience with the administration of many different places,
Yeah.
but it seems that
At least you have
things that are
evidence.
done,
Yeah.
I mean, if you present straight evidence politely, I think it will be considered.
Yes.
That may not be a problem. But of course, yeah, please, you know your systems best, and please take appropriate caution. Sandeep Nayak is when new teacher will get confidence in teaching, especially when students' feedback is low for a long period. That's a tough one.
Shall I?
Yeah,
Yes,
please. Yeah, feedback. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, so now this is a very valid and a very practical question. So one thing I suggest is that you must involve an expert or a colleague in this, because the very fact that you are getting, the teacher, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you yourself. The teacher is getting a low feedback for a prolonged period means that the teacher is not able to interpret the feedback correctly, meaning the teacher is not able to decide what improvement he or she should make to raise the quality of the feedback. Now this is where you need to take the help of a colleague or an expert. So this is one strong suggestion I would give you. Second thing we should note is teaching is like any other skill. For instance, if you want to learn music, right, you have to learn music under the guidance of an expert, right, a teacher. So while some people may have naturally a good voice and may be able to pick up just by hearing from others and so on, I'm talking about music. Some others for whom it is very important that they sing well for some reasons other than having some other than the fact that they have some great amount of innate talent, then they must seek the guidance of an expert. So similarly, even in teaching, you have to take the guidance of some expert. This is what I would say. If you want to improve so that expert must sit in your class, and then the expert must give some specific advice to you, right? Specific feedback to you, personal feedback as to where you should improve. Okay, so this is what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. That would help a lot. And I'm sure you'd have appropriate people who you feel confident about asking to sit in your class and give feedback. That's a very standard thing to do, mentors and so on and so forth.
I just wanted to add on that hopefully the system in which they give you feedback has specific criteria, because if there is an overall mark or something in terms of what do you think about this teacher, student might just be giving an opinion, but you don't know where to really improve. So if that is missing, then that's important to know which criteria I'm really scoring low and how do I change that.
So if you, in fact, that's a good point she has made. If you can tell us if there is a specific area in which you are getting a low feedback, then we can, address that issue.
Yes.
Then Jyotirmay Patel again, how can we improve or increase attendance in our class? Is there any tricks, method? This problem is not for a single teacher. This problem is increasing day by day in general. This is very true. I'll tell you what I feel, and then I'll ask my colleague to comment on. IIT Madras has an 85% attendance rule, and there are two ways of looking at it. When we were students, that was not there. and therefore only the interested students attended it. And some of these students would say, I'm going to understand anyway, why should I attend classes and so on and so forth. That's one of the arguments that is made against attendance. However, attendance, I think, serves many different purposes. Certain, what shall I say, there's a certain rigmarole that you bring into, or a certain level of streamlining that you bring into the student and so on and so forth. These are values that you pick up. Not just that, if the students are not doing well for some reason, and especially in residential institutions such as ours, if the students are not doing well for some reason, they've gone astray and so on and so forth, I think this is a very good marker to know that things are going wrong and we could take appropriate steps to get them back. I'm sure everybody has a view on this.
Yeah, we spoke about this last time. In Australia, a lot of universities don't have attendance as a criteria, but still we would collect that data because, as you said, it's a very important way to streamline it. So if a student is continuously performing not up to the mark and then they claim that this is not being done right, at least you have a way to say, if you haven't been attending a class, how do you expect to perform? How do you achieve those learning? So I think it's a very important thing in terms of streamlining, as Professor G said.
Anything to add? Shall we go to the next one?
Yeah, we can go to the next.
Sandeep Naik, feedback is the only method to assess teachers' performance. I think it's a question. Would you want to?
Oh, is feedback the only method? No. So basically, the set of documents which vouch for the teacher's expertise is more than just the feedback from the student. So here, by feedback, we are saying the self-report or teacher rating, right, which you are trying to collect. So apart from that, how have the students performed? So the marks, average marks, the standard deviation of marks in your class obtained by students. And then, as all of us know, the marks depend on the kind of questions we set. Therefore, the question paper that was used to evaluate the students. So this is not only the quiz question paper, but assignment questions and so on. So apart from the student self-report, which you are probably calling as feedback, we have these other things also which should be used to decide the teacher expertise, namely the question papers in the quizzes and the assignments, the performance of the students on those questions, and then also what is the policy of the teacher about attendance, about some other things and so on, right? So a statement from the teacher about his or her teaching policy and philosophy. So I would think that these four things together are the evidence for the teacher's expertise. Yeah.
Suresh Sadashivam asks, in laboratory session, most of the experiments are over maximum of 60 minutes, but the session continues till 120 minutes and more. How to make the students effective in 120 minutes? Okay, very briefly, I think the lab sessions are anyway longer. They're not just 60 minutes. We have almost 3 hours approximately as the lab session. It could differ from place to place, but I very much doubt whether it's just 60 minutes. I don't think your question also says that. Anyway, coming to the crux of your question, design of the lab experiment is a very important aspect. We need to design it so that students can finish it reasonably in that time. If they take 5 minutes this way, that way, that is okay. But otherwise, they must be able to finish the experiment within the time allotted, or only that aspect should be given as an experiment. There could be one-off experiment, especially in a bioengineering lab, biological engineering lab. If we want students to pick up cell growth, that takes a while, and we design things appropriately for that experiment alone, so that they can be in the lab for a little longer, or they can go and come back and then take readings. They need to take readings more closely in the log phase, maybe for that. The things are adjusted so that the log phase comes during those 120 minutes, and then they can come back and take. One-off experiments are okay. But in general, the design of the lab experiment is very important to ensure that the students can finish it comfortably in the 120 minutes or the 180 minutes that we are talking about. Therefore, a lot more importance a lot more care needs to be taken care of, a lot more skill needs to be brought in designing the experiments that can be completed in that time. That's what I would say.
I used to give more structure to all my laboratory session in a way where, apart from collecting the data, students will have to write 2 or 3 questions which would require using the data and comparing it with the literature. I used to call it as investigative report, which they will submit after in a week's time. So that way they have an incentive and they like I need to use my data and compare critically appraise with the literature, and there was a little bit of marks allotted to it. So that way they would use their time more in a meaningful way and ensure that they have learned and applied in a particular context.
I would also say that it's good for us, either the lab technical staff or us, to do the experiment, and if we can finish it in half the time, then we need to give it to the students. And this is the same for the question papers too. Question papers, a good rule to follow is if you can finish it in 1/3 the time, then you can give it to your students for the entire time. That I think works best. Move forward.
Yeah.
And Pranesh Nasami, thank you. You're very welcome. Akshay Saxena's 4th question, that's to me. Recently, I read your paper on improving coherence in technical writing from the TNC website. Oh, good. Can you please explain it very briefly? Okay. This improving coherence in technical writing addresses an aspect of improving the writing skill in students, especially research students. What we have seen is that writing is not a skill that is natural to most people. In fact, about 99% of our students don't have writing skills. In my 25 years of teaching, I've probably seen 2 students or 3 students, if at all, who had a natural skill in writing. For the rest, including me, it's all learned skill. And this paper provides a means by which you can improve your writing so that it is understood easily by the person who is reading it. Okay, that's the main need for writing itself. That's the main requirement for writing. You're writing something to communicate. So in one reading, the other person must be able to understand, assuming that the person is at a reasonable level, must be able to understand whatever you've said. And this is very difficult to achieve for especially first-time writers, people without experience and so on and so forth. Even people with experience find it difficult to write. Writing well is not a very easy thing. Coherence talks about a certain structure in your writing. There is a relationship between the various parts of your writing. And that, I believe, is the main ingredient that is missing, which impacts on the understanding of the material. And that is what is taken up in this paper. I'm sure you know the details of the paper. If there's anything more, then I can answer it as in response to another question. Then Akshay Saxena again, do we use MBTI in real life in universities? Yes, we do. I did give you examples in the course. If certain types of, okay, since you're insisting on that, and I'm giving the insistence here, certain types of students have an ease in picking up certain types of information and in responding positively to certain types of learning situations. And if we know that these variations exist, then we can design systems so that people feel comfortable in their learning process. More importantly, we don't feel irritated when they are not able to learn well because of the one kind of system that we give them. That is the main aspect that was covered. Specific examples have been given, at least 3 different examples were given in the lecture. Please go ahead and take another look at it. It might become a little clearer. Not able to read the, is that Russian or somebody else? Okay, we'll ignore those 2. Thank you for the smiley. Sandeep Nayak, feedback is the only method to assess competence.
I think we just discussed that.
We discussed that. Okay. Maya Patel, thank you. You're welcome.
So maybe I will say, please look up on internet about teacher portfolio. The teacher portfolio is a set of documents that vouch for a teacher's expertise in teaching, right? So I think you can do that. The internet will tell you what are all the constituents of a teacher portfolio, right?
You're very welcome, Patel. Sandeep Naik's forthcoming exam, whether all the questions are objective type. Yes, they're all objective type, but there are different degrees of learning that we test. Some questions are, will test the lower levels of learning. There are some questions which test analysis, not synthesis maybe, but definitely analysis and evaluation to a certain extent. You're very welcome, Suresh Radhasivam. Question number 5 from Akshay Saxena. He said he had 5 questions. Though I have 2 ideas where I feel that they can become acceptable piece of work, but I am literally struggling to even write a decent research proposal. That's very common. Would you like to add something? Who's looking to work with you?
Which one was that? Oh, okay. But I'm literally struggling even to write a decent research proposal. I think this is something that one can, one can't do on this like this.
All I can say is that it's not easy. You're trying to reach the highest levels when the lower rungs are not fulfilled. So you need to immerse yourself in the work and then figure out a question. If it's not easy even for experienced people to pick up an area for research, which is meaningful. You can pick up any area for research, but something meaningful, something in which you can contribute uniquely and so on and so forth, that's not easy. So what you're going through is not something that is odd. It's very natural. It is to be expected. So more reading and more immersement in the area is what is required before you can write a decent research proposal. And then next question from him is how TLC could help me in fine-tuning my research abilities, even making my current ideas professionally acceptable. Oh, that TLC cannot do anything about making your ideas professionally acceptable.
See, if you
cannot do our own.
I would suggest you really need to write down what are questions you have in mind, and then look into literature to back it up. What work has been done for each of those topics. That's the only way to go. And I wouldn't say that will take 2 weeks or 3 weeks. That would take close to 3 months to 6 months to get a fair understanding of what are my questions, what work has already been done, what is a gap in the literature, and how do I address it, and then look for resources based on that.
Yeah. So the thing is, fine-tuning your research abilities and so on, they happen only when you join a research program.
Yeah.
It's not possible to do all this and then join a research program. I think again, I would repeat that analogy that you want to learn swimming, you have to jump into water. You can't be outside the water and then try to watch how others are swimming and let others tell you how to swim and so on, right? You have to jump into water.
Right. More importantly, I think he has done a lot of thinking himself.
Yeah.
Which is very different, which is at a very different level from many others.
Yes.
Given the fact that I think he has his own institution. He spent a lot of time thinking about it. Thinking about it is not enough.
Back it up with literature.
And a lot of facts. And then discussions with people who are experienced, and that would help. Taking a swimming example, I think he is swimming in a baby pool and trying to jump into the deep end of the bigger pool. That is not easy. Then where was I? Okay. So V.S. Muralidhar Palanki, thanks for addressing our doubts in real time. You're very welcome. Looking forward to attend the faculty development program. Coming to FTP. I'll be happy if all the colleges make this course mandatory. Oh, that will be nice. Thank you. And Akshay, really look forward for TLC help so that I may be able to take significant steps in this area in the upcoming days. I think you should come up with your part of the deal and then look where with very specific things. Whatever you have right now are very general. That is a little difficult to provide help for. Some specific questions, certainly TLC can help. I think you could be already talking to Dr. Edamana Prasad. He'll find the right person to help you if you have the right question. Sandeep Naik, thank you. You're very welcome, Sandeep Naik. And then Ranjit Krishna, hello sir. How different is PhD in education from National Institute of Technical Teachers Training and Research when compared to technical PhD in the respective field of study? I have no experience. NITTR, that's an institute, national institute. It's quite near to our institute. Some of our faculty have been directors of those institutes, of that institute. but I have no idea as to teaching education. Do you have any idea?
No, I don't, but I wanted to say this point earlier when we were talking about how to decide on a research topic. And so PhDs actually are not, I don't know anyone who has won a Nobel Prize doing the PhD. PhD is an introduction to research. So once you know your interest and your question, you also need to find institute which gives PhD in teaching and learning if that's your interest, and who are the faculties and what are their expertise, because that needs to match well as well. There could be, I would be interested in some other topic, but if I don't have any support or institute doesn't support in the same direction, I will be by myself, which is fine as long as I'm aware of the challenges. So anyone who wants to do PhD in teaching and learning, since this is not a common subject which you will find in every university or every institute, you need to look deeper into it, which institute offers, who are the faculties who are doing research into this, and then start communicating with them.
And also, yeah, go ahead, please.
You could also do one thing. If you are from nearby Chennai, you can just come down and then talk to someone in NITTR to find out what happens there, and you can ask them how is the PhD, what involves is doing a PhD in that place, right? And then you can come down here. And if you're far away, you would still call up someone from NITTR, right? And you can ask them. So they'll give you some idea. I think that would be
the right person. Yeah.
Some meeting or talking is required to the people.
And also the point about point that Richa made, PhD is training you to do research. Okay, that's a very important aspect. I strongly believe in it. And I think Steffi will vouch to the fact that I always want my students to get out fast. Minimize your time in the training program. They take their own time. That's a different issue. But I always keep pushing them to finish fast as long as they make suitable contributions to the body of knowledge. But I very strongly see it as a training period to do research appropriately. She says, okay, and then thank you very much for all your answers. Really useful responses. I'm glad, very glad. You're very welcome. Any other questions? I think we're running out of time. These questions are over. They are here. Oh, good.
Good. So that is really
that is nice.
And this is good interaction.
That we can take a. We're out of time. No, we didn't give any end time. Okay, 15 minutes maybe because I have another appointment at 6:15. Let's see how many questions we can. A few questions we'll take.
Because we might have answered some of these already.
In a situation, okay, I think we will. You want to take this?
No. Enough learning material in classes. What is this? Well, I'll read it out.
Yeah.
In a situation like these days, with problems of employments, underemployment, number of students in most of the technical institutions are becoming less to lesser. It has become difficult to motivate the students, especially the third and fourth year students, to attend regular classes. Is it because of the present employment situation, or maybe in general they are not getting enough learning materials in the class which are really available on net from different online courses? So this is about attendance, I think.
Attendance.
This is about motivation.
Motivation
to learn.
The situation with employment, that goes through cycles. That's what I believe, except for some starting up fields where it takes a long time to establish the market and so on and so forth. The other engineering fields go through cycles. Sometimes it's low, sometimes it's high. And yeah, students do respond to that. One of the reasons for lack of interest could be that. But they can be told that we are training you, and then you could do various different things. If you get a job, you could directly apply it there, or you could do other things and so on and so forth. In fact, one of the most important things that we do in IIT is to tell them how to analyze situations and so on and so forth. The knowledge keeps on changing with the time and so on and so forth. But the skills that they develop and the way to look at knowledge, the way to apply knowledge and so on and so forth, that is the main aspect. Maybe that can be emphasized if possible. And the other aspect of the question is not enough learning materials. Yeah, that's an important aspect. As the world changes, the information in class would become less and less important or more and more redundant. So the lecturer or the teacher must provide a certain aspect which is different from just the information alone. As to how to get the appropriate information could be the starting point. That students will not know. As to even if you give a syllabus and so on and so forth, even if you give a book and things like that, how to get the appropriate knowledge and how to use that knowledge appropriately, I'm sure these students would need help. Other than that, how to develop their skills, which skills to develop, and so on and so forth. It's more of a guide that the teacher needs to become rather than a person who just delivers information. Information is going to become less and less important in the classroom. If we move away from information to the things that really matter, I don't think that is very easily replaceable as of now. We did talk about that in the previous session, artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, but I'm not too sure about that. Others have had. Okay. Next question. We have answered some of these. Research and engineering colleges. Research, I believe, research in education and engineering colleges, or can we use research in education? Yeah, this we have answered. It's the same. Active learning. Let me go this way. Active learning is one of the best forms of learning. Therefore, why have our students completely in the passive mode of learning? Okay, let me go here.
No, just scroll the gray bar, the bottom.
Yeah. That I'll have to do. That keeps moving this and that. Yeah, that has come up. Active learning is one of the best forms of learning. Therefore, why are our students completely in the passive mode of learning for the entire lesson? Yeah, that's natural. That's what you'd expect students to do. So we'll have to. They are students. Children need to be told what is good for them in the initial stages, and therefore students also need to be told what is good for their learning in their initial stages. Once they realize the significance of it, they will pick it up. I don't think they have realized the significance. Even then, in a crowd, there are other inertial aspects that take over. If most students are a little tired and so on and so forth, they will not get into this mode till some incentive is given to them, some goading is done, and so on and so forth. And once you get them onto the active mode, keep politely repeating, can you do this? Can you work this out? Why don't you work this out? Tell me the answer. Just keep repeating it a few times. Then most of them will jump onto the bandwagon, assuming that they know that's a better way to learn. And that is quite a challenge to get them to figure out that it is indeed a better mode of learning. Once that is done, even if it is done, then you'll get into all these challenges. That's why each class is an experience in itself, I believe. We'll have to deal with it as it comes. Anything to add?
I just wanted to add, it's our responsibility to get them out of their passive mode and make them an active learner by designing the class in a more structured way and breaking it into small segments and giving them some activity so they come out of their comfort zone. At the same time, making the classroom comfortable for them to express and clear their doubts. So I think it's a lot of our responsibility to
Definitely
engage the class in a more active way.
There's one more question. I'll come back to this a little later. There was one related question which I wanted to take up. It is an important one. We have answered. As we know, there's something about if active learning is the best, then how do we deal with reflective learners or something like that?
The second part of that same question.
Oh, the second part of the same
Yeah.
question.
One that we just answered. The second
cross that.
Reflective learner.
Reflective learner. I wanted. Active learning is one of the best forms of learning we have as students. And what about the reflective learner? Okay, this I had some thoughts on, so let me tell that to you. Yes, there are two aspects to this. One is active learning versus passive learning. Active learning is using activities to learn. Okay? That activities are typically done in a group. Okay, and they can be done individually also. Nothing prevents the teacher from designing things appropriately for individual performance of those activities. Okay, so there are two different aspects. One is active learning and not active learning. The other one is groups, not groups. Reflective learner, I believe, will learn better through active learning, but not in a group. Maybe the most popular ones are the ones that involve group and active learning. But you could have individuals doing active learning also. You'll have to handle them appropriately in a class. If they are in a class, you should probably go to them and goad them slowly to do things on their own and so on and so forth. If the concern is to get them to pick up things better by active learning, I think that is a given. That I believe in, and that active learning is always better. It may be a challenge to address each one separately, but it can be done. I've done it earlier. I've done it in some classes where the participation was not so great. That's on one side of it. There's another side to it. The ability to act in a group is a desired and a necessary skill for any engineer. Okay? People will be working in groups, whether we like it or not, unless the person gets into esoteric research or something like that. Even research, you'll have to work in a group. If you get into a lab, you'll have to work in a group. You'll have to figure out how to get your things done without putting off others and so on and so forth. And therefore, it's a skill that anybody needs to learn, even if it is not their natural skill. And this might be a good way for them to pick up that skill as well. We have answered that. Any further? We have done this. Comment on which method of teaching learning is better, chalk and talk or ICT. That entirely depends on the person. You can make them learn very well using chalk and talk, especially for math courses. But I wouldn't categorize them so tightly. Finally, there would be some
topics which are covered in one way and other topics which are. Yeah, as we said, it depends on the topic, and you have to decide what is the best instructional strategy in which I should be delivering this particular topic. And as you rightly pointed, in mathematics and stuff, chalk and talk might really work depending on the pace, how you're delivering it. So a lot of other factors which matter rather than
What
just
is ICT?
Information communication technology, use of other
PowerPoint and all.
PowerPoint and so on and so forth in general.
So as long as the technology is used to enhance the learning outcome, then I think it's well justified. But chalk and talk is also chalk, and Blackboard is also a technology, not a digital one. But if you're able to achieve your learning outcome using that, well and good. There is no rule.
For example, if you want people to understand something in 3D, it's going to take you a lot of time if you restrict yourself to chalk and talk.
Yeah, that's when the technology is important. But if it's something for which you don't need a technology, you don't have to go and use.
So let me give you one more example where ICT can really help you. Is that supposing there is some concept, idea, or figure that you have to use repeatedly in your course at various points of time, and to put it on the board every time you need it, it might take you some minutes. Whereas the first time you do it on the board and then you convert it into an ICT and keep it, and the next time you need it, you can just put up the ICT. So that way you save your time. And not only you save your time, because the same particular figure or a text is repeated, it's easier for people to remember it and recall and connect with.
How to perfect my spelling? Only practice can help, I think. IITs are creating any CMS LMS platform like Moodle for engineering colleges in India? You'll see.
We are not.
But why do we need that when we have?
Every institute has their own learning management system.
Yeah.
And Yeah, nothing at this stage, which
Nothing
I'm
at this
aware of.
stage, Prasad will be able to answer that if at all there is
If at
anything
all,
in the.
yeah.
We don't know of any. Can we have certificate course in this area? This is already a certificate course.
Yeah.
If you write the exam and you've done well, I mean, done well in the sense beyond a certain level, you'll certainly get a certificate. I hope you've done your assignments, submitted your assignments. Sir would like to share all questions and answers through mail group. We'll see. Let us. This video is available. Will already be available. Therefore, you could always refer to that at any point in time.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll have the video. That's a lot more effective than text. I think that would be better. I have a question related to how to control class. Yeah. Do you want to take it up? Or?
So you should tell us what is your class size. Okay, or we will probably consider different situations.
Yeah.
So class size of 30 and class size of 60 and class size of beyond 100. Maybe these three cases, right? So definitely there is some difference in the approach required to control classes of different sizes. So the main thing in a large class is that the contact with the students gets reduced, right? In a class of 30, you can easily ensure a person-to-person contact. The teacher can, at the same time, appear to the students to be connected to each of them. But the moment the class size increases, then this contact is less. The larger the class size. So one thing you must do is you must walk around in the class when you have a large class. This is the way you can ensure that at least for some time you are near the students. This is one thing I would say. Second thing is, for controlling a large class, you must be really audible to all the students in the class. So if your voice is not loud enough, then you must use a mic. This is very, very important.
This is not an easy skill to have. It comes with experience. And even experienced teachers can face very tough times. Let me relate one of the tough times to you, and just to tell you that you'll have to think on your feet to control the class. With the way you look at students, the way you modulate your voice, all these are important in controlling your class and bringing them to whatever they're doing. Of equal importance is ignoring the things that you can ignore in a classroom. Not even 100% of the students are not going to be listening to you, and you will know that they are not listening to you. But if they are not creating any trouble in the class, whether you can ignore them is something that you pick up with experience. There are many. Every class you ignore some small number. As long as the number is not large, it's fine. Coming back to the story, there was a time many years ago, I think about almost 10 years ago, I used to go and teach a class in IIT Hyderabad. I used to go from here and teach a class in IIT Hyderabad. It so happened that during one of those days, the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh had passed away, unfortunately, in an accident. And the students were agitated. They wanted their classes to be cancelled and so on and so forth. I think that was being worked upon. But in the meanwhile, I was asked to continue with classes. So I went into the class. I was setting my presentation. My mic was not working at that time. I was getting my mic fixed and so on and so forth. It was a large class, about 120 students. And some students, I think, were very disturbed for whatever reason, and they started shouting slogans in class. I had never seen this. I had never seen this in all my years of experience till then. I was stunned for a minute. Luckily, at that time, the mic started working. So I turned to the class and told them, let's all stand up for a minute to pay our respects to the departed chief minister. And then the slogan stopped. They all stood up. There was silence immediately because they had to. I was addressing what was important to them. And then after they sat down, I told them, whoever wants to leave can leave. Whoever feels bad can leave. And till the announcement comes, I'll have to continue with the class. And believe me, one person left. One person out of 118 or something like that left. And then I gave them a piece of my mind, because this is not expected of students in an IIT. This is an IIT Hyderabad. This is not expected of students in an IIT. Yes, you could have your political ideas and so on and so forth, but that never should get in the way of your academics. Academics is pure. And that I very strongly believe in. I gave them a piece of my mind. And then I continued with the class. I had a wonderful class after that. I had to continue for about an hour, and then I think the classes were cancelled. And then the students left because the entire institute had shut down for that day. So you'll have to come up, you will face situations like these, and you'll have to think on your feet to come up with means of controlling the class. It's not a very easy thing to do. Any other comments? How do we simplify non-technical questions at lower level students? I think we can, if you can focus your question a little better, you cannot simplify questions, non-technical questions. I don't understand that. Does anybody understand that? How do we simplify, non-technical questions at lower level students?
No, we will
Putting them in different words, maybe.
I don't know what is.
I don't know what the meaning is. If you can
Reframe.
focus your question, reframe the question, then we'll be able to answer that. Next question is, every time an institute is expected to use some innovative teaching techniques, this is reducing proper interaction. I don't understand that. Why should it?
Maybe a little bit more.
The proper interaction with students and faculty. That should
Not
not
clear.
happen.
Not clear what it means.
Students and faculty, yeah, it's here. Students and faculty.
Should be the other way around.
It should, if those are an appropriate innovative teaching technique to do,
Interaction
just the
should be
opposite.
more, yeah.
Or probably when people are not experienced in employing those teaching techniques, then this would happen. That should reduce with time. That should not happen. If you can give us specific examples, we'll be able to take that up a little better. Forward. That is repeated. About this we answered. Wide gap between existing teaching skills practices and the required effective means of teaching in most of the traditional public universities. Kindly. Most of the traditional public universities and private engineering colleges is well known. Okay. Kindly elucidate on barriers and challenges for uniformly adapting effective pedagogical tools in current system of education. Not able to read that.
Let's go to the main page, then we can do the whole book.
Can you do that? I think I'll have to go.
We will wind up.
Can we take this as the last question?
Last question, yes.
It's not doing that. Wide gap between, okay, if you say so, and then kindly elucidate on the barriers and challenges for uniformly adapting that we answered. Barriers and challenges wherever wide gap is there. Kindly elucidate on the barriers and challenges for uniformly adopting, I suppose, the effective pedagogical tools in current system of education, wherein quality of both enrolled students and recruited faculty is often not up to the mark. Even accreditation and recognition of institutions may not be always genuinely earned, but possibly fixed. We live in a non-ideal world. I wouldn't comment on many of the things there. The courses such as these are designed to help people improve their teaching or their methods by which students can learn effectively. I think we need to move in small steps. I don't even know the situation in many
Yeah, so I think this is a little bit out of
the context here.
context here.
Maybe if you can send us an email, we can ponder a little over it and then answer questions more specifically. I think, should we stop here?
I
need
think,
to go.
yeah.
We have 5,
All
7
of us,
minutes.
yeah.
All of us need to go. Thank you. That's been a nice session. Wish you all the best. Traditionally speaking, one wishes good luck before the exams, so wish you do well. The paper is balanced, so I'm sure all of you would find it interesting. If you prepared well, you could do very well. Thank you.
Good luck to all of you. Yeah.